Folks, I wanted to talk a little bit about balancing games. Um, so, there's a lot of stuff I could talk about with regard to balance. However, I think the important thing is that one, balance is important in single player games, and I'll explain why. And two, that balance is important for the type of experience that you're trying to create for the player, which depends on a lot of things. So, why is balance, broadly speaking, important in a single player game? Well, because I think if you take it to any absurd extreme, people would agree, yeah, that's not good. So, for example, if you can start a game with a 22 pistol and you can go pam, 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 and like every single Death Claws, Brotherhood of Steel Paladins, everything dies in one hit, no matter where you hit them. And they can't, really hurt you at all. Well, in that extreme case, that is not fun or good or probably the desired experience that you're going for. Similarly, if none of your weapons feel like they do anything to enemies, even the starting enemies, they're not differentiated in any way, and every enemy one-shots you, well, in most games, that's not actually the desired experience, and it feels bad. So let's just put that to rest. Balance is important. To what extent it's important does depend on that experience that you're trying to create. A while back, I made like a little video about balance in New Vegas and how it was mostly vibes based. So here's an important, this is a controversial statement I'm going to make. Fallout 3 was not a hard game there. Skyrim is also not a hard game. These games are not, the combat is not super challenging. I don't think that's crazy to say. I would say it's probably by intention. There's a video I saw a few days ago called Why Skyrim, which is basically about why is Skyrim the game that everybody plays and has kept playing forever? And while this is not the only reason, the fact that it is quite forgiving to the player in terms of scaling is part of it. Like, you can wander around the whole map to your heart's content, and with a few exceptions, you're probably not gonna die. You might have to slam a bunch of food and potions and things like that, but it's a real low friction gameplay experience. And I would say the same also applies to Fallout 3. There's a lot of scaling in the game, and pretty quickly you can feel extremely strong and you can steamroll lots of stuff. There are a few exceptions, of course, like if you run into a Deathclaw unprepared for it, then yeah, you can die pretty quickly. But generally speaking, it's not a super challenging game. So when I set out to direct New Vegas and look at balance, while I did want to make it harder, one, you can only make things so hard through just stat tuning. Difficulty is more than just tuning weapon values and damage values and creature hit point values and things like that. It's more than that. Behavior, environment, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So one, trying to suddenly make the game into the most challenging shooter you had ever seen was not going to happen. So also the audience probably, for the most part, of course there are exceptions to this, but they probably would not have wanted that experience. So most of the focus with New Vegas was trying to make the beginning a little more challenging, tone down the scaling a bit. So that's one of the reasons why, there are Deathclaws and Cazadores and super mutants north of Goodsprings, was to show people from Fallout 3, hey, there are pretty challenging areas of the game, and you can't kind of just slide all over the map and not not feel the heat from it. But that being said, there was always a path forward that was tuned around your level, and the weapons and things like that were mostly balanced for that initial experience. By the time you get to Vegas, I was not under the impression that the player was going to be sweating bullets and feeling super challenged by anything short of taking on overleveled content. So that's what I expected. And so the balance of weapons was really relative to the content you were expected to experience it in, and then relative to each other. So early on, when you're using a 9mm that pistol, you're using it in a different circumstance than you're using, let's say, the shotgun or especially the varmint rifle. They're tools for different purposes. And generally speaking, you want to switch weapons for the circumstances. You don't want to try to use one weapon to do everything. Now, of course, as the levels rise and the range of character sort of optimization gets wider, the floor sort of stays the same and the ceiling keeps going up. So it becomes very difficult to try to tune things, especially as you get into DLC content. And I'm not going to say that I completely abandoned the concept of balance within the DLCs, but it's a lot more challenging. It's a lot more challenging just because there's such a wide spectrum of levels you can go into it in. And then what choices the player has made to that point in terms of combat optimization is also a lot different. Also, are they modding their weapons? Are they using, specialized ammo and things like that? So as the levels rose, I realized that eventually you're going to wind up getting a similar sort of experience as Fallout 3, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people came out of that experience really enjoying it. So if you feel like a powerhouse and you optimized your character and you're just mowing through stuff, that's for that type of game. I think that players respond well to it. So that being said, if you were to make a game that really positions itself like this is a Souls-like game, and that was the progression, I don't think players would respond positively to it. If the DLC for Elden Ring had come out and it was a cakewalk, then people would have, I think, said, okay, this is bad. This is not what I want. So tuning and balance, I think ultimately all of that stuff, it is important, but it is important for the type of experience you're trying to create. And if you're creating a new experience where the player has no sort of built-in expectations, you're free to sort of frame that in the way that you want. And it's important that you do frame that so people understand the type of gameplay experience that they're going to get. I do think that when you're working within a series, I wouldn't say have to, but if you make a choice to go against what the trend is in that series, then you should be prepared that players are going to react to that. And some of the reaction may not be positive. Some players do like that stuff. There are clearly, players of New Vegas, players of Fallout 3, players of Fallout 4, who they want to mod the game to make it super lethal. If you get shot, if you get winged by a grenade, you just die. And then if you headshot somebody, they just go down almost regardless of level or whatever. That is a specific type of experience. And certainly if people want to mod the game to play that way, I think that's totally reasonable. But again, if you're a designer and you're trying to create a range of experiences, then you need to be cognizant of that. Again, for comparison, something like Deadfire, story mode is super easy. Story mode is, you don't really have to optimize much of anything. All the math is in your favor. When you start getting, real weak, the game makes it super easy for you. And then on the other end, Path of the Damned is pretty challenging. But then for people who say, actually, Path of the Damned is super easy, you dummy. Like, I am actually the master general of role-playing games. Please give me a challenge. Then we had the additional Mogren's Fires and the Ultimate. And the Ultimate was designed to be a really big challenge that you're not going to just steamroll. And, but that was only possible by really stacking a bunch of onerous restrictions through the Mogren's Fires. So anyway, that's enough about that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. One more thing I thought of, once again. So there is also something to be said for first-time user experience versus veteran user experience. So one of the funnier things, it happens on almost every game that I work on, is, 4 months after the game comes out, 8 months after the game comes out, I'll see a Reddit thread or a post somewhere that says, after about 1,000 hours in the game on my 12th playthrough, I realized that if I power level and beeline to these two pieces of gear, the game's pretty easy, really. It's like, yeah, man. It is. You figured it out. So I do think that there's something to be said for that's fun. Like, especially in a game that's open by design and you're encouraged to kind of do it how you want, that level of meta mastery where you know where things are, that's part of the fun. And I don't really think that that's, strictly speaking, something that's considered for overall balance for first-time user experience. That's quite different. So hopefully you guys will forgive me if it's okay to beeline to certain items and power level and do things after you have a ton of mastery in the game. I think that's part of the fun, personally. Thanks.